Hey folks, and welcome to lab number 7. This week in lab, we are going to use some of the concepts that we've learned over the last couple of weeks, which are the interfaces and the abstract classes and the concrete classes, and we're going to use those together in a way that is slightly different. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about a new IDE for you guys called Replit, which is going to allow you to implement code and test it directly in a web browser. There's really no new concepts this week, so I'm not going to talk about the concepts. I'm just going to talk briefly about Replit. So this is going to be a nice short little video. So the reason we bring this up is because when you're taking your lab midterm and your lab final, you'll have access to Replit while you're doing it. And Replit basically is just an IDE like Visual Studio, except it's right here in a web browser and it allows you to do everything remotely. There's all kinds of cool features of Replit, but I'm just going to go through some briefly. I'm basically going to re-implement what I did last week. So the first step is you're going to need to sign up for an account with Replit. When you sign up for an account, I would recommend you use your student KSU address, so student at students.kennesaw.edu address. Do not link it to a Google account or a Facebook account, which are two of the options that it gives you at the beginning. And the reason I'm asking you not to do that is because while you're taking your midterm, you'll have access to Replit, but you'll have to be able to log in. And the lockdown browser is not going to allow you to log in with Amazon or Google or Facebook logins. You're going to have to be able to type in a password. So when you create the account, set it up with your Kennesaw address and remember your password for that address. Once you're in, you're going to end up at a screen like this. And then to work, what you're going to do is you're going to hit create, and then you're going to choose C# out of the list of options and hit create Replit. And what's going to happen is it's going to load up a screen that looks like this. It's divided into 3 columns. The column on the left has all of the files. The column in the middle is where you actually type your code. And on the right is where you see your input and your output. And it works really, really simply. So up here at the top, you've got a run button. It gives you a default skeleton with a hello world. If I hit run right now, you can see on the right-hand side, it's going to say .NET run, and it's going to compile the code, which is why you're seeing new files appear on the left there. And then you're going to see the output on the screen on the right. And there's your hello world. So last week in class, we created an interface which was called iMath. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm clicking this button right here on the left called Add File, and I'm going to do iMath.cs, which is going to be a C# file. And so I'm going to say interface iMath, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing I did before, which was public int add numbers, and that takes in int num1 and int num2, and then I'm going to have a public int subtract numbers, which takes in int num1 and int num2, and both of those are abstract. I'm putting the semicolon at the end. There is no method. As you're typing, it does most of the same thing that you would expect in Visual Studio. It'll do most of the same things as Visual Studio, like tab completion, and also giving you options and underlining things that are syntactically wrong. I will warn you, it's a little bit slower, so sometimes the underlines don't appear for a few moments, and sometimes they randomly appear and then disappear. So it's a little bit weird, but it's still pretty cool. All right, so I'm going to implement another class. So I'm going to add another file. This time it's going to be decimal math.cs. And so this is going to be class decimal math, and it's going to implement my iMath interface. And so now as soon as I do that, you're going to notice that in a moment it's going to underline that in red to tell me that I currently have a compile error. If you want to check right now, you can just hit run, and what you're going to see over here is the compile errors. And the error, of course, is going to be that I'm implementing an interface, but I haven't actually implemented the 2 methods that interface requires. So you can see decimal math does not implement interface member add numbers and subtract numbers. All right, so to fix that, we're going to do public int add numbers, and that took in int num1 and int num2, and I'm going to simply say return num1 plus num2, and then I have a public int subtract numbers, int num1 and int num2, and then I'm going to return num1 minus num2. All right, so very, very simple stuff here. That should all compile now without error. And while it's working on that, I'm going to go back over to my main program, which is main.cs, and I'm going to go ahead and instantiate a instance of decimal math. So decimal math, my math equals new decimal math. All right, and then I'm going to prompt the user to enter in a number 1. All right, and I'm going to read that in. And so again, that's a console.readLine. Problem with that is that gave me a string, so I'm going to have to do an int32.parse whatever I got from that, and I'm going to store that into an int num1. All right, and so that's that, and then I'm going to read in num2. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it. When you copy, you're going to want to highlight it, right-click, and hit copy, and then paste is Control-V to do that. And so enter in num2 and int num2, and now I should be able to add them together. So I should be able to say mymath.add numbers num1 and num2, and we're going to store that into an integer answer. And I'm just going to print out that answer. All right, and there we have it. So assuming I didn't miss, I missed a semicolon there. Let's see if I can get it in before it noticed. You can hit stop and then run again, and that'll restart the compile. So that implemented an interface. The interfaces go in their own separate files, just like they did in Visual Studio. You just create the file and then type whatever it is that you want in there. It does do the tab completing. It does do the syntax highlighting. Here it is asking me for num1. I'm going to say 8. Num2 is 2. And it says the answer is 10. So you can see it works just the same. And I'm able to type in the 3 windows. So a couple of cool things about Replit. This particular URL right here at the top, if you were to take that and type that into your browser, which you could do by pausing the video and just grabbing it here, you'll be able to see this exact code, and actually you'll be able to run it as well in your browser. There'll be a button on there that says fork. It's actually located in here if you're looking for it inside of your own code, but if you're looking at somebody else's code in Replit, there's a fork button up there. And so the cool thing about that is if you go to this URL and you hit fork, it will copy this Replit into your Replits, which you see when you log in initially on the home screen. There's a button for My Replits, and these are all of your Replits. And so if you grab the most recent Replit or the one that you copied, you would then be able to go through and modify it. You'd be able to go through and take a look at it and see, what you liked and whatnot. This is the one that I just had. And so then if you wanted to play with it and try different things, you'd be welcome to go do that after you have forked it. You can't change my copy of it, but you can fork it and then make your own version of it. All right, so that is Replit. Again, you'll have access to this in your lab final next, or your lab midterm, and also your lab final later on in the semester. So it's something to be aware of. This week in lab, you're going to be doing stuff that is just basically a review of the things you have learned in the last couple of weeks with regard to interfaces, abstract classes, inheritance, polymorphism, and all of that kind of stuff. So that's it for this week. I will see you guys next week.